morning, everybody. Welcome to our joint Transportation Finance and Transportation Policy hearing. Again, we have the Policy Committee here because this is an important topic that I think even those who aren't directly involved in finance should hear about. And again, I wanted to welcome the policy members and the public, and thank you very much, Commissioner Zelli, for coming back. The fact that we've seen you now twice in 2 weeks, good thing for a commissioner to do, and very, very much appreciate your time and your interest in interacting with us here on the Transportation Committee. So I just wanted to start out by thanking you. Members, the reason that I've invited the commissioner back and some other members of the Transportation Finance Advisory Committee is that their report is very important. This is a committee that Representative Beard sat on, as well as former Representative Morrow, who represented the House. So we had a bipartisan transportation group, metro and rural, on that task force for us. They met over a period of over a year, I believe, Commissioner, and heard a lot of testimony, went over a lot of data. And one of the key things that I think is before not only this committee and this legislature, this session, is to assess what are the unmet transportation and public transit needs in the state, and what are our resources or needed resources in order to bridge the gap between the need and the available financing. And so Mr. Zelli will go through the committee's process and report and recommendations. And what I'd like to do after his presentation, and there's others as well that were going to comment from the Business Committee, others that were on this task force, we'll have Commissioner Zelli go through his PowerPoint, and then we'll pause for questions, and then we'll get to the other panelists. So I'd like, I know this is a committee that has a lot of questions, and I'd like to just take them one by one rather than piecemeal, and so that's how we'll proceed today. So welcome to the committee, welcome back, and again, very much appreciate your time today.
Thank you, Chairman Ornstein and committee members. It's an honor to be back so soon, and also a particular privilege to be presenting an overview of the Transportation Finance Advisory Committee, which, as the chairman mentioned, was a year-long process. I was delighted to be a member of the committee, is my former role in the private sector, and so I have some familiarity with it. I should clarify now, as commissioner, I am going to present the overview of the report and really kind of representing the committee, its conclusions, its recommendations, and talk a little bit about the process. This is a process facilitated by MnDOT, but it is not itself a MnDOT Transportation Agency recommendation. It really is one that is the group of 19, which is a pretty broad representation of input. And also, first I should say, too, that this report is pretty detailed, and I recommend if you like reading reports with many graphs. Many of you are very familiar with transportation, but this is a very good overview of where transportation funding and some of the issues are for our state. And it is available online, and we can get you copies if you would like it, if you don't already have it. I think it's kind of worth kind of keeping at your side during the next few months. As the chairman mentioned, the committee was established a year ago, and really kind of given the complication of transportation funding and also the fact that there hasn't been a complete kind of overview look at all the modes. MnDOT is part of this, but involves airports, involves metropolitan transit, both local, state, federal funding. So the idea behind the committee's overview was to try to look as broadly as possible at all issues and sources of funding. We considered many factors, and quite frankly, along the process, there was a lot of conversation about what values are really important for Minnesota, what the economic and kind of issues to be considered, and of course the quality of life, the aspect of competitiveness, and really kind of what was available in terms of innovative finance. Are there other mechanisms, structures, opportunities that hadn't been fully considered? So that's, as I mentioned, it was a pretty broad representation. You can see we had elected officials, Representative Beard and Moreau from this committee, but really many layers of government and throughout the state. Private sector representation, myself included, but include large companies, small companies, companies based in greater Minnesota, as well as a former economist from the Federal Reserve, Art Rolnick. So we had a pretty kind of great cross-section, and I have to say, with these monthly, almost half-day meetings, a pretty robust process and conversation. So the governor asked us to consider three different scenarios. What would it take? What would the financing be to kind of under the current resources available? What would that look like? And then, if we wanted to maintain the transportation system as it is, what would that take? And then, if we were to have an economically competitive, world-class transportation system, what would that funding scenario look like? And to make kind of a recommendation, where should we be, and how should we finance it, and what are the issues associated with it? We had testimony from outside groups. We had a website that gathered information. MnDOT did some of its own research and analysis, and there was open houses throughout the state. So we tried to provide as much opportunity for those that had a point of view and could provide expertise to come to the table. We considered a number of factors, including, what is the current status of the system? How is it aging? What are the safety considerations? As well as, and this was a little bit outside of most transportation analysis, what's an economic impact? How does it affect the economy and the competitiveness of our state? So I'm going to go through pretty quickly, but this is an overview of some of the big issues that we're considered by the committee. And first and foremost, of course, one of the larger concerns is the effect of inflation. The purchasing power of our revenue streams projecting forward just isn't going to be able to maintain or build at the capacity that it has been currently doing, or it has been. And so this kind of graph shows a little bit about what the projected revenue would be able to, in a sense, purchase in the next 20 years. So we're looking at a 20-year kind of outlook. And we kind of looked and we're trying to measure the AFG. That's the annual funding gap. You'll see AFG kind of throughout the presentation. What is it on an annual basis where we do not have the resources currently in place to address what we have viewed as required? And here is just kind of a summary page of the funding gap. And again, this is available online, and we can, if you don't have it, we'll certainly share it. But you can see this is not just the MnDOT state highway system, although that accounts for between $10 and $12 billion over a 20-year period of a gap. But it includes really all modes in all jurisdictions, trying to get away from just the silos and kind of look at the state as a whole. This was done with analysis within MnDOT and from the various agencies. Again, the scenario 1, here's the current anticipated revenue from existing resources. Scenario 2, the increment needed to maintain the current performance. Current performance is the current system we have, how to keep it in good repair. I've learned a lot in 10 days, even as commissioner, that these assets are not only critical for operating our transportation system, but they really are the assets that underlie a lot of our bonding, a lot of our financial capacity as it is now. Like any asset, you have to continually maintain it and to upgrade it to keep it performing at existing levels. And this is really the funding gap between existing sources of revenue and what the need would be over the next 20 years. And again, if you think back to that inflation page, you can see that that alone shows that the current resources are not sufficient to maintain the system we have. Scenario 3 is looking at the economically competitiveness world-class standard. And that is to say both scenario 2, where we want to maintain the current performance, but also to expand it to adjust for changing populations, changing lifestyles, be able to layer in the innovation and the opportunities that innovation and technology provides. And so what we look at peer regions, we can say, what are the best practices in maintaining the transportation system in the future? And so this gap, which is approximately $50 to $54 billion over a 20-year period, is really the gap from the current funding sources to what a world-class system would be. I think the governor asked the right question: what will it take to be a world-class system? And as often said, our mission is not to just have a world-class system, it is to have a world-class state, to be competitive economically and with our quality of life. And so this is, we have much more detail that goes into these summary numbers that are available if you wish. But this gives you the order of magnitude. So here's the conclusions. I think it was the really broadly held consensus of the committee that transportation system is really critical for the state's economy. That there's no secret that this is arithmetic, that there's really significant funding challenges, and that in order to maintain a competitive advantage, in order to kind of be the high value state, we will really need to think hard and consider where additional revenue could come from to meet that need. We obviously, not obviously, we spent a lot of time talking about how we could have higher impacts with existing resources and how to do more with less. And some innovation, some technology, and some best practices are helping to address this. So by no means was this just a revenue-only solution. It was really looking at efficiencies within the various agencies and authorities that work on the systems. We talked a lot about high return on investment strategies. In fact, that became one of the guiding principles for all modes, was where can the investments have the greatest impact? And one of the kind of the filters, the screens toward thinking about transportation investments is to start measuring and to ensure that they have a high return on investment. And return measured broadly is both societal impact but also basic economic benefit.
So, I know that we have one question, and perhaps members, if this was kind of an introductory sort of mission and vision of TFAC and process. So if you have questions perhaps about this part of the presentation, because I think it's a two-part thing. We're going to move into some of the revenue options and what they, how they assess those. If you have any questions just about this initial part, we can take those now. Otherwise, we'll have Commissioner Zelli move on. But Representative Petersburg, I think you had one.
Thank you, Chair Hornstein and Committee and Commissioner. Back to the previous slide, I'm just trying to wrap my head around exactly what the definitions of each of these three scenarios are. If I understood correctly, the first scenario is at the present funding system, the way we're doing it right now, that would be just status quo. The second one would be if we were to maintain the performance of the system, what kind of the funding would be. And the third one is if we were to maintain a model class transportation system. Is that correct?
Correct.
My question then, it seems like there are some in the scenario 3 and actually in which there are reductions. For example, the state airports, it's actually at 0.8 versus status quo is 1.4. So does that mean that right now we're putting some additional dollars in? I'm trying to wrap my head around why some of those changes are occurring.
Well, these numbers represent actual increases off the base. So this isn't the total funding. This is the additional. This is really measuring the gap between the current funding and what would be required.
Okay, and so the status quo is also in addition to what we have as status?
No, I believe the status quo is the revenue expected over the next 20 years. So it's really the anticipated revenue. And so really if you kind of look at the bottom, to simplify it, we expect approximately $40 billion of revenue coming from all these from the sources associated with these areas. And then in order to maintain a world-class system, it would be an additional $50 billion. So for a total of $90 billion.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Representative. Okay, then we can proceed with some of the substance of the options and scenarios that you outlined.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question.
Okay, about the mission vision.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Proceed, Representative Benson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You made a mention that if we wanted more, these are huge numbers, and world class sometimes is in the eye of the beholder. All these things have economic opportunity costs. So when we're looking at $39.3 billion now, but we're potentially asking for not just 39 going to 50, but actually looking at somewhere close to 80, $85 billion. That's a significant public investment. And I'm not saying that these aren't important things. One of the reasons I'm on this committee is because I believe that for economic growth that we need to do these things. But that's significant. And you made an offer, and I think it behooves most of us, if not all of us on this committee, to say, thanks for the overview, but yeah, I want to get into the weeds. So if you have a link to how you arrive at these numbers and what world-class means to you and to us, I think that we need to do some in-depth study of that. So before we make, I'm signing on to it, we know exactly what we're getting and whether or not we really need it. I'm going to ask a lot of questions as we move through when we get to specifics about what are the alternatives to some of these. This is world-class, but what if? So I really feel like we do need to. In the weeds numbers, please.
Okay. Thank you for that, Representative Benson, and that's a good reminder that both with the governor's budget, which we're going to hear details of next week in this committee on transportation and roads and transit and bridges, as well as this report, other entities have their ideas and reports. It's really this committee's task to sort through all of this and then come up with some proposals of our own. So this is just an overview, and obviously there are many options and choices that we have, and this is just the big picture. And but I do appreciate, Representative Benson, that I think it's always a fair question to ask how figures are arrived at, and I'm sure that we'll be able to get that information. So proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And yes, I think these numbers are very large, and I'm not. We don't present them merely to shock, but to give you a kind of a high-level sense of the magnitude. And also do welcome and invite you to subsequent meetings to look more carefully at the individual components. On an annual basis, the numbers are less shocking, but that is why this committee that I'm kind of representing the point of view on is that taking what may be incremental steps now have very large impact over the 20-year period. Again, the committee spent a significant amount of time talking about kind of the principles behind how we would look at the investments. Again, high return on investment was probably in the top of the list, as well as economic efficiency, to really kind of look at tying investment to outcomes. And looking at ways that we could do, is it all always needed, and some of the efficiencies that I previously mentioned. Transparency, quality of life, making it strategic, not trying to fill every need, because there's always a limitless desire, but try to tie both investments to a overall strategy and to specific outcomes. Reliable and sustainable. Reliable meaning a system that is going to last a generation, and sustainable in that it isn't building something that requires so much more additional funds to maintain that it becomes infeasible. So these are some of the, and also the fact that market forces should be our friend, not our enemy, that the market pricing and some more traditional private sector mechanisms might be brought into a public system to help both streamline and to be able to adjust the system in order to kind of gain greater efficiency. So the recommendation is, again, this is a very broad overview, but really goes in 4 areas. And we were focusing pretty quickly on world-class because we felt the high-value state, it is a place that we would want to measure and really universally felt within the committee that it is worth championing the best system possible. Wide revenue options for roads, having dedicated sales tax options for transit, local government revenue options, and then on the project level, various more specific project revenue opportunities. To use a Minnesota word, there's a wide smorgasbord or buffet of opportunities to get revenue, and we had an interesting presentation by Jack Basso from the AASHTO, who suggested when other states are looking at this, do not be shy about naming what the real need is. And also, there are many financing options which might help incrementally, but don't cover the lion's share of what really is required. So being bold doesn't mean being reckless, but it also means finding those sources of revenue that have the greatest impact. And we learn from our competitive states and regions about what some best practice is. The sales tax option for transit has been widely used, if not universally used, by transit systems in major metropolitan areas. And certainly everything at a local project level, whether it be some tax increment financing, public-private partnerships, there are certainly opportunities. So the committee did not say that a lot of options were not feasible and shouldn't be considered, but it was more to say, here's some recommendations that are appropriate both for a large scale and then also a project scale level. The system-wide revenue for roads really looked mostly at the 2 main sources, registration fees, and the excise tax on motor fuels. These were in place now. They are very efficient to collect, and we could see that over a 20-year period, although we can talk about the next generation of mileage-based user fees and a lot of other ideas, but it really comes down to the most efficient way to cover the cost of a system is from some of the very traditional but very efficient financing mechanisms that are currently in place. We did consider both the not entirely the political feasibility, but at least the ability to kind of really explain how revenue is tied to the outcome. And we recognize through our online community and from our workshops that the fuel tax and the registration fees are widely accepted and understood as revenue associated with transportation. Transit, again, I mentioned the sales tax is what most larger metropolitan transit systems have as a funding mechanism both for capital and for operating costs. We looked at capturing the remaining leased vehicle sales tax, which is currently not dedicated to transportation, and we looked at how some of those sources could be allocated to the greater Minnesota Transit to help it get closer to its target need. We talked and recommending a local government revenue options. This is really in the county level and for wheelage taxes. We looked at how the use of transportation improvement districts are a very common tool and could be employed, and also local option sales taxes at the county level to cover some of their transit needs. Greater flexibility, greater equity, the idea that actually giving at the local level some ability to have some flexibility was a value that was widely appreciated. So other revenue options. We talked about tolling, we talked about value capture, we talked about MinPass. MinPass, as an example, was a great way to increase the capacity of the existing assets. It's less a revenue source to expand the system, but it is one that helps create better use of existing roadways and eliminate the need for maybe adding a much more expensive option, such as more lanes. We did explore public-private partnerships, monetizing assets. There's always something that should be continued to be explored and studied. It is not the forefront of our revenue recommendation. It is one that isn't necessarily money doesn't fall from the sky when you have public and private partnerships. Revenue is still required, but it might be a real interesting tool for mitigating risk and being able to garner greater efficiency. So it is one that is recommended to be explored. We looked, of course, at general obligation bonding. Very critical, particularly for local roads and many other areas which are not cannot access the trunk highway fund, and will continue to be a very important source of capital expansion. So, what are the challenges? Well, we're raising a lot of revenue and a lot of taxes, so that's a challenge, and we recognize that. In fact, we had one private sector member of the committee who said, I want to at least write, and his letter is in the report, where he said, look, this needs to be put in the greater context of the state's budget and of the tax burden on our citizens and our businesses, and we should at least consider where these investments are coming from and where the taxes might affect our economy as a whole. And I don't think anybody on the committee disagreed with that. it should be noted that this member also said that he and his company strongly endorsed the recommendations of the investment, thought that transportation investments should be one of the highest priorities for the state. So in fairness, I want to give you that point of view, and it is certainly one that needs to be fully considered. But one of the, as part of our charge to the committee, was to consider how this could be framed, how could it be marketed, how can it be described. And some of our consumer research that conducted at MnDOT really kind of was enlightening that about half of Minnesota citizens actually aren't aware of how transportation is funded. I mean, there's no mystery. It is complicated. But it really kind of gave us, and it gives us at MnDOT, and I think the entire committee, realization that that the state and all these stakeholders need to do a better job at communicating how it is that this system is financed, and also where the economic impact and the outputs are. So, conclusion and recommendation is more education is really needed to communicate both the opportunities, but also the risk, the downside, which we haven't really gone into, of underinvesting. So here's just a couple of pages, which will give you just a flavor of some of the work we're doing at MnDOT to help explain both what the outcomes are with adequate funding. Again, this is very high level. And what the outcomes might be without proper funding. Yes, there's less innovation. Roads start to decay. And one thing, and I know this is my former role as a bus guy, if you don't do the maintenance on a vehicle or a road or any asset, the cost didn't go away. The cost happens every year, whether you're spending it or not. It just gets a little bit more expensive. A crack in a road that's not filled, the water goes in that crack, and suddenly that's not a pothole repair, that's an entire roadway section that needs to be replaced. So the idea is that we don't have good analysis, but the cost of underinvesting is maybe even more significant than just catching up. It becomes more, I guess, geometric rather than just arithmetic. So our next steps, the report was given to the governor in December. The TFAC recommendation will obviously come to you as committee members and the Senate committees throughout the session in as much detail as you would like. We have talked to many of the other committee members. I'm sorry, a few wanted to be here today and couldn't allow with their schedules, but they have volunteered to be both a spokesman and a resource for their recommendation. And both MnDOT and other agencies and other stakeholders will be communicating some of the conclusions and, frankly, some of the facts. Here's just an example of some of our kind of quick overview for our citizens to understand just how pervasive the transportation system is. Now on my 10th day on the job, I'm learning even more how pervasive it really is. It's quite remarkable. And as our population shifts, particularly in the metro area where it's growing significantly as the aging of our population, we had a very interesting presentations from the state demographer and from some of the trends that really will be taxing our transportation system in a different way. There is the metropolitan transit perspective, but we, as a committee, we're really looking statewide, that there is a statewide impact of all investments. Even investments in the metropolitan area affects statewide businesses. We heard from businesses who are bringing their goods and services through the metro who are impacted by congestion, even though their plants and businesses are in the greater Minnesota. So here's our little, I think our last slide, that little blue person that represents the transportation system, I think, and basically affects all citizens and families. Again, here's some of the goals we hope to communicate. Really, again, expressing and tying in the value of the investments.
Thank you.
That's my big overview.
Thank you. So, members, why don't we take, we'll take as many questions as we can. Maybe the upper limit would be about 15 minutes or so. And then we have some others who are going to testify who are involved in this process from the business community. But let's take a break now for member questions. I know that Representative Howe has been waiting for a while. And as we do that again, my thanks to you, Commissioner, and I know that you and your staff are very available. And so if your questions aren't answered today, members of both committees, please make an appointment and get your concerns heard. So let's start off with Representative Howe.
Thank you, Chair. Commissioner, in the numbers that I've seen on the scenarios as far as status quo and maintaining and expanding, the question I have on the numbers actually stems from a previous slide talking about the inflation. Do these numbers also include the 5% rate of inflation, or what rate of inflation did they use on these figures?
Commissioner.
Thank you, Chairman and Representative Vinaya. I believe these are real numbers. In other words, they're not just 2011 numbers, but I'm not entirely sure. I might look to Mr. Buckeye. You can come. I'll invite him down, because I think that's a great question.
So, Mr. Buckeye, welcome to the committee, and please state your name for our record.
Thank you. My name is Ken Buckeye, in the Office of Policy Analysis, Research, and Innovation with Minnesota Department of Transportation. I was the project manager for the Transportation Finance Advisory Committee. And with regard to the question about inflation, these numbers represent the real dollars that will be needed over the next 20 years. And I believe they were adjusted for inflation as well.
And Commissioner? Or Chair?
Yes.
And that rate used was the 5% then, or?
Correct. That is my understanding. I think we assume that 5% because that has been the historical inflation rate for construction cost over the last 25 years or so.
And Mr. Chair, Representative, that my understanding then it is. When I say real dollars, is it's not been adjusted for inflation, but the revenue side was also inflated as well. So that gap should be actual numbers.
Thank you. So I have Vice Chair Bernardi, then Beard, then Representative Beard, and then Representative Holberg, and then we'll do a time check. So that's the lineup for now. Vice Chair Bernardi.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. And this is for Commissioner Zelli. One of the things I noticed that I've seen in MnDOT's, this wasn't a MnDOT recommendation. I noticed that multimodal transportation is not used, and I was wondering how that came about in the vision, and maybe it's just assumed, I'm presuming, because a world-class system would need to be multimodal. And then my follow-up question to that, in your gap analysis here, does it, and I actually have my bottle from the Gateway Pedestrian Bridge in Columbia Heights, and what my question is, are you including the safety and a multimodal transportation system for all users in your gap number that's in here?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative, although the language doesn't say multimodal, you're absolutely correct. This is a multimodal vision. That is why it was a lot of the work was looked at really mode by mode, and many of the presentations before the committee were highlighted by various division directors of that mode. But the overall vision, and as you know, the vision for MnDOT has been very multimodal, and there was a consensus within the committee that this is one transportation system that is interlinked and not really siloed, although it sometimes is analyzed in its silos only because that's where much of the current funding is dedicated towards specific uses.
Thank you. Representative Beard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for your indulgence. I was speaking to a group and talking about this very thing just a few moments ago, so I was sorry to slip in late, especially with the Commissioner and the Chair, Commissioner, but we did see a lot of each other over the last year as we put this whole discussion together. Mr. Chairman, just a couple comments, not really so much as a question, but I want to say thank you to Commissioner Zelli and Mr. Buckeye for putting the presentation together, and Mr. Buckeye for helping facilitate this discussion. There were a lot of things we talked about as a committee members over this past year. A couple things I'd like to highlight that maybe the Commissioner did, but I'll just touch on them again because it's something, Mr. Chairman, that we're going to want to touch on here going forward. But just a couple observations. One of the things we didn't spend a lot of time on, as I recall, I did miss a couple meetings here during the election season. We were kind of busy. Was changing technology and what that meant. You know, we're taking a look today at a system that we know and understand today, which is way different than when it was designed in the 50s, thinking particularly of the Eisenhower Defense interstate highways. But one of my friends from CTS over at the U took me aside and said, Beard, he said, there are some cool things just over the horizon that are going to completely change the game here, particularly as it comes to personal transportation. And those of you on this committee for a while know that I think the most useful and wonderful invention ever made was the automobile, and that single-occupant automobiles are a very, very important part of our society and our culture and our economy, and we need to stop giving them short shrift. Changes are coming in that are going to revolutionize the way we transport ourselves. And that's a philosophical discussion in a way, but just know that that took place on the committee. We did touch on it briefly, but I don't think as much as we probably could. But again, since we were supposed to work with current reality and not fantastic stuff in the future, we touched on it and moved on. The intensity of consensus is something, too, that we plumbed a little bit. You know, bipartisanly, we argue about a lot of things around here. How big is government and what should government do? One of the areas where there is large consensus, and I call it the intensity of consensus, is that we have agreed for a century and a half in this state that the government should provide the means for us to get around, meaning all-weather, hard-surfaced roads and bridges. We agree on that. There's very little partisan bickering over that. I think the difference comes, and it came out in TFAC a little bit, when we started talking about then, is it the government's role to actually move us around, or is it our responsibility, and how do we accommodate that, and where do the lines fall in that? Is it the government's role to tell us to walk or ride our bikes, to get on a bus or live on a train line, or is it the government's role to figure out where we want to live and then build a road or a bridge so that we can move around? That was part of the discussion. I don't think any consensus was reached, but just so this audience and this team knows, we did talk about it, and we kind of gauged where the line of partisan enthusiasm and unity ended and where the bipartisan stuff or the partisan stuff started to come in. Another discussion was a fascinating discussion about what then does world class mean. I have some railroad background, you know that. And one of the things we had to accommodate was whenever economies changed and the economic factors surrounding our company changed and we had to put off deferred maintenance, which, by the way, is a very precise number and engineers can figure, we just had to accommodate that. We didn't run trains at 79 miles an hour. We slowed them down to 49. Sometimes we slowed them down to 10. We still got the job done, but we didn't get it done as well as we could have had we invested. So I guess the comment is, the observation is, when we talk about unmet need or the unfunded need, know that that's a nebulous concept that's fraught with political meaning, and there is no clear consensus on what then unmet need is. Some things we agree on, like deferred maintenance, like the Commissioner was talking about. If you build a road, you know you just have to put so many dollars in it every weather cycle, or it's going to come apart on you. We agree on that. How big, how fast, and how far? Maybe not so much. So know that the population can accommodate things if we don't, as a government, perform. For instance, when the bridge fell. I think one thing that surprised the traffic engineers enormously was how fast the population accommodated the changes in travel patterns. I think we as politicians sometimes don't give our citizens enough credit for how fast they can think on their own feet and take care of their own needs. So just some observations, Mr. Chair, and Mr. Buckeye and Commissioner, it was a pleasure to serve with you, and it was a fascinating discussion. There were some things that were very clear, some things that was clear to me are going to be a little more political, but this is a discussion. I think that's why we have committees, Mr. Chairman, and we'll argue over what then is unmet need and what is the role of government in actually moving us instead of just giving us the means to move ourselves.
Well, and thank you for that, Representative Beard. I think that's a very clear articulation of the areas of agreement that we may have on this committee and areas of difference. And there's nothing wrong with resolving differences in a political environment, which has always in this committee been very civil and thoughtful. And you know, I know we'll very confident we'll continue that tradition in the Transportation Finance Committee. So thank you for that. Representative Holberg, and then I think we're going to move on to our next panelists.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On your transit dedicated sales tax options screen, you have a line item that says increase by $32 million annually the allocation to Greater Minnesota. It's not clear to me where that money comes from.
Commissioner?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Representative Holberg. Well, I guess the implied implication is that there's additional resources garnered from dedicating fully the leased cars subject to sales tax. That is now, understand, going to the general fund, and then the recommendation would be to dedicate that fully to transportation and to transit, because there's the non-met need, kind of the equal amount in Greater Minnesota.
Mr. Chair, if I might, so there was no discussion about changing the distribution of the 40% of the MVEST as it currently.
If I may, Representative Holbrook, actually that question came up, but I think there was consensus on the committee that the motor vehicle sales tax works, the distribution works, and there was no desire to change it because it does work.
Right, and if I might, with the growing use of electric cars, where as ratepayers we're subsidizing lower electric rates and special hookups in people's homes that have cars, some may say that given that they're not contributing by paying gas tax and using the roads, there's, you know, we are, maybe some could say they're not paying their fair share. Was there any discussion around that issue as a growing trend and another cause for diminished gas tax revenues?
Commissioner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Representative Holbrook. I think that was a conversation talking about some kind of mileage-based system. That is an ongoing conversation that's happening both in this state and many other states and nationally. And I believe the committee's kind of a consensus that this should be on our explored. It's on the radar, but it is kind of, we're not quite sure how many years in the future that's really feasible, and it's probably not an area that's going to have a robust, immediate solution. Having said that, I have to suggest that a recent analysis I just looked at shows that the life cycle revenue provided by a Chevy Volt is actually greater than the one from a non-electric Chevy, same size, because the sales tax on a higher cost car, because of its electric, actually provides more funding than the gas tax, the revenue that's provided by the non-electric car. So as the price of electric cars come down, then that's going to be more of an issue. But it's, again, not quite so clear as to whether, given that there's multiple sources, tab fees, MVEST, and gas tax, that really the revenue not achieved because of higher gas mileage is really that significant of an impact currently. But something to be continued to watch, and it'll be part of the ongoing debate, I would say, in the next 5 years.
Oh, Mr. Chair, it doesn't always have to be a mileage tax. Was there any discussion around a surcharge based on mileage or?
Well, I defer to both Representative Beard and Mr. Buckeye. I don't recall we went really deep into that issue, talking about surcharges at this point. Just kind of thought, keep that on the radar, but it's not immediate. That was my recollection of it.
And
Representative Holbrook.
Mr. Chair, if I might, I know that you're here today as a member of this organization putting their recommendation, but you do wear two hats in this committee. One of the common criticisms of the governor's budget is that it's very heavily loaded to transit and virtually nothing for roads. Can you comment on that? Or, I mean, seems to be a more balanced approach, while quite large in its goals and scope and levels of taxation.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, Representative. You're right. I am representing, because MnDOT facilitated this process, so I'm in this context really representing the report and the committee recommendations. Wearing my Commissioner of MnDOT hat, I think that we have gotten clear signals, from all parties, and as a representative of the administration, I am delighted to be able to kind of give the facts and to be able to kind of talk about what the unmet needs are and what the options are. I know that the governor's budget, we actually embrace the fact that he has recognized the importance of transportation infrastructure and that there is some high return in opportunities, both with transit. And I think there's allocation, some general funds for the transportation economic development, which we think is something that we're going to be pursuing at the agency. Although the governor has said he doesn't believe a gas tax is politically feasible, he has not said he's going to dramatically opposed to it. He's really asked me to start, and I look forward to the opportunity to help kind of explain both the conclusions from this report and other reports that talk about the unmet need. And I would certainly support his budget, but I think that he has certainly encouraged us to have the conversation. So I think that's kind of where he is and where the administration is, and it's an opening kind of concept. I think now transportation financing is going to be an important issue of both the administration and I think for all citizens.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. I have two more members, and then we will draw this part of the hearing to a conclusion. Chairman Earhart, followed by Representative O'Neill, and then I'll make some quick concluding comments, and we'll bring up our chamber panel. So, Representative Earhart.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Holberg, it seems to me that I'm hearing you be interested in a broader range of funding for transportation. You don't just want to focus on transit, but you'd like to have some road money, and that might be of interest to you from what you're saying.
Well, Mr. Chair
Representative
and
Holbrook.
Representative Earhart, he has proposed a large sales tax increase in the metro area. He could have just as easily divided that between roads and transit as opposed to just transit. I'm just a little shocked, given the unmet road needs in the state, that there was not more balance in his budget proposal.
Well, Mr. Chairman, Representative Holberg, I think you're acquiescent to the fact that we have to have a broad transportation package rather than just the governor's.
Well, Mr. Chair and
Representative Holbrook will respond, and then we will.
Chair Earhart, you can think whatever you want.
Okay. So again, members and of the public, we have some of the parameters of the debate here, but which we will get into in the committee. But I appreciate both of your thoughts on this. The last comment or question will be from Representative O'Neill.
Thank you, Chair. I have just 3 clarification questions. You had mentioned that you wanted to do the increase in per gallon excise sales tax, which would generate $15.2 billion in new revenue. And looking at some of the details provided to me previously when I was looking at the 2 options that you kind of spelled out here, when I add that up over the 20-year period, I come to 39.64 cents on one option and 40 cents on the other option of increased sales tax. Is that accurate? Is it a 40-cent increase?
Right. That's the way we were, Chair and
Mr. Buckeye.
That's the way we were presenting it. It is essentially a 40-cent gallon gas tax increase spread out over 20 years.
Thank you. Follow-up, please.
Yes,
Thank you.
one last follow-up, Representative O'Neill.
Thank you. And then in the governor's budget, he's talking about reducing the overall sales tax and expanding it across services, which we don't know for sure what services are in and which services are out. Have you been able to kind of figure that into your numbers if you're talking about increasing the transit tax? Because now you're talking about taxing, obviously, many, many, many more things. Have you factored that into these new numbers?
Oh, Mr. Chairman,
Either of you?
Representative, I will look to Mr. Buckeye, but we have not, that budget proposal wasn't in front of this committee, so the committee really didn't consider that, but it did recommend a 0.5% increase, and the governor's recommended a 0.25%. So I'm not quite sure where the numbers come out, unless you've done something.
Well, if I understand your question, Representative Chair, the recommendation is for, in the TFAC report, was for a 0.5-cent sales tax increase in the metro area, and that was a 0.5 cent on top of those items that are currently taxed. Existing tax. Correct.
Okay, well, I want to thank the members for a very good and spirited discussion, and of course our MnDOT representatives and Commissioner and Mr. Buckeye. And I think, this is a really good start in terms of getting some of these issues out on the table. I hope, it's certainly my hope, that we can put together a bill that addresses all the sectors, that also addresses revenue, and looks at some of these needs very closely. We have great stakeholders in this committee. We have the business community. We have urban and rural interests. We have labor. We have cities and counties. And it's my hope that over the next few weeks we'll start to hear from them, both responding to this report, responding to the governor's budget, bringing their ideas. And so what we'll do, beginning today, is start to hear from some of those stakeholders. And so that's why we have a panel from several chambers of commerce that are both interested in this report and interested in transportation broadly. So we'll kick off that process. But I, again, very much appreciate your time, and we look forward to moving forward together with you.
Thank you very much.
So if the members, I have Michael Langley from Greater MSP. I have Judy Johnson from Twin West Chamber, Todd Klingel from Minneapolis, and William Schroyer, who is with both the Minneapolis and St. Paul chambers, who works on infrastructure and economic development. I don't know if you guys want to, men and women, would like to appear together or individually, or however you want to do it. The floor is yours. And members, what I'd like this panel to go through their presentations, and then we'll have questions and answers once they're completed. So please welcome to the committee and state your name for the record.
Thank you, Chair Hornstein. My name is Michael Langley, and I'm the CEO of Greater MSP. It's an honor to be presenting a few minutes of testimony this morning. I'm going to go first. Greater MSP is a 501c3 nonprofit organization. Our focus is on increasing capital investment and job creation in the region. We don't lobby, so my testimony will be based on the questions that were asked of me to present our position on what it takes to sell our region, to sell our state on a national and global scale, and what the key elements of that are relating to this committee's work. I'll be followed by a lot of our business partner organizations in the region and in the state, whose role is a little bit different. They're more focused on advocacy, so maybe it makes sense for me to present a few minutes of my thoughts, and then I think they'll follow me with basically probably more detail on their consideration of the specific study work that's been done. The question that I was asked to really address directly was the information that's posted on our website. We find certainly transportation is one of those things that when we answer the question, why would anyone want to locate a business, invest, and grow in the greater Minneapolis-St. Paul region? And as we drill that down, amongst those answers are educated workforce, tremendous innovative companies that are world-class, the central location of our region, the unmatched quality of life, and right in the center is efficient transportation and transit. So I want to just, for a couple of minutes, explain where that stands with the people that we talk to every day. Over the period of last year, we spoke with literally thousands of businesses globally who were either already in our region and considering investment and growth, or companies and investors from outside our region that were considering the Minneapolis-St. Paul region for their investment. And in conversations with thousands of companies, that funnels down to literally hundreds of projects that we have been working, and right now there's probably 120 project activities that are going on where our organization works with the state of Minnesota primarily through DEED, but with our partner organizations in all 13 counties, specifically 11 counties of our MSA that are located in Minnesota, to coordinate and make it easy for companies to invest and grow in this region, to help work together to coordinate their questions and their issues around these major infrastructure and business needs. The region, in every case, stacks up well in many of these areas. Certainly, transportation and transit are highlighted in the pages of our website. What we like to talk about is the comprehensive capabilities that we have. Certainly, U.S. News & World Report ranked the Minneapolis-St. Paul region 5th in the nation for public transportation in 2011. Their ranking was based not only on our existing infrastructure, but on our planned infrastructure as well. They specifically said, we are ranked at that level because of offering fare-free transit routes for downtown workers and opening new commuter and light rail systems to connect outlying communities to central business districts. So that's highlighted as one of our strengths. Additionally, however, and very significant in all of those thousands of meetings that we have is our air service and the strength of our international airport as one of our key transportation transit assets, and a continually growing need for additional strength of our airport. Our port and our rail assets are also considered strong in the overall context of our transportation and transit. So the multimodal strengths that we have as a region are a huge selling point for the Minneapolis-St. Paul region on a national and global scale. If I were to rank the top 3 elements of question and answer that we have whenever we deal with companies already here or companies that are interested in our region for the future, the very first question that they always ask is, do you have the quantity and quality of worker, of human capital, to help my company grow and sustain a competitive advantage? So that will always be the first question and the most important issue that we generally face with these thousands of inquiries we get. The second question that we get is, do you have an efficient and effective business infrastructure to support our business? And within that question of infrastructure, usually the first question that comes to mind is, do you have the transportation and transit infrastructure that will get my people to work efficiently and effectively and will get my goods and services to and from customers and suppliers? The third question they generally bring up then is business climate issues around cost, other factors of cost of doing business. It could be our tax environment, our regulatory environment, and other things. But in every case, the cost of doing business always comes back to those first 2 things. The cost of their employee and the quality of their employee, and the cost of the infrastructure that supports them. Road infrastructure, transit infrastructure, water and sewer infrastructure, and other business services infrastructure around them. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions regarding those priorities and what businesses are asking us. But most importantly, I think understand and know that we are a globally competitive region with over $200 billion annually in gross regional product. We're the 40th, if we were a country, we'd be the 43rd largest country in the world, just our MSA. And so we compete on a global scale. The companies that we're talking to are not just the companies in the upper Midwestern United States. They're global investors from Asia, from Europe, from North America, from South America, and from Africa. So we continue to push our region in this direction to be globally competitive and to look in the long term. We will have more than 1 million more people in our region in the next 30 years. And so our decisions regarding our infrastructure growth for Minneapolis-St. Paul needs to be thought of in the long term for us to be globally competitive, not just in the next biennium, but in the next decade and in the next 3 decades. So I appreciate the opportunity to make these comments.
Yeah, and thank you, Mr. Langley. I think that was a very important articulation of the role of transportation in our economic growth and development and jobs. So I appreciate that. Now we have our representative from Greater RST. RST is what the airport in Rochester baggage tag is. So Representative Benson.
Well, just one comment, and it could be a matter of semantics. I think that Representative Deem framed it well. I think most people are on this committee because they have a passion for transportation and what it can do economically and quality of life and many things. But I was excited about your presentation in that you used a couple of words. First, it's that we're in a global economy and we compete well. And then you cited some U.S. News and World Reports that ranks us 3. I was ready for you to use the word that we were world class. Would you frame it in that way?
Mr. Langley.
We are a world class region by virtue of our size and strength in many industry sectors where we possess global leadership, and most importantly, as we look forward to the biggest needs of the world over the next 100 years, food security and water security, our region in itself is the globally leading technology region for both food and agribusiness infrastructure and technology, as well as water management and water security. So we are well positioned for the future if we continue to maintain all the elements of our economy and infrastructure that we need to match that global leadership in industry.
Thank you. And members, I want to make sure that we can get the rest of our panel up here. We have about 20 minutes. So what I'd like to do is...
thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Langley. I appreciate it. We'll have our remaining testifiers, and then we'll take some time at the end for questions. But if you could just hold your questions, let Mr. Scheer know that you want to be on the list, and we'll get to you at the end of this panel discussion. So if each of you can then welcome to the committee, the 3 of you, our Chamber of Commerce panel for today. And if you could state your names for the record, and welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to launch this, and indeed it's a Chamber of Commerce Day. Obviously, we have a triumvirate in front of you this morning. Thank you for this opportunity. I'm Todd Klingel. I'm the president of the Minneapolis Regional Chamber. I will let Judy and Will introduce themselves in turn. But I wanted to make one comment based on the conversation thus far this morning about world class, because I personally wince when I hear the term world class, and it's come up a couple of times. Not because I don't think we want to be there, but I think it sounds like, well, can we really afford to be world class? These are austere times. We're cutting our budget. We're watching our dollars. Maybe we should near world class or something. And the truth is, we can't afford not to make these investments. Call it what you want, but we need to make these investments to remain competitive, period. So I just wanted to put that on the table for you. You have this information, I believe, at your places. But what we wanted to do was take a quick look at what the commissioner said. And by the way, when you gained a commissioner, I lost a chair. And Charlie Zelli was the chair of our chamber until 12/31, and now he is all yours, and you are fortunate to have him, I think. We pulled 4 quotes out of the TFAC that we just wanted to go over this morning, and they're on the screen. But the first one just says, what we have here is insufficient. The second one says that we've learned that transit retains and attracts. We just learned that again from Mr. Langley, who's out in the field with his team. The third one says business seeks certainty. We talked about that in a number of areas, none more important than what's going on with transportation. And then the last one is either we grow or this region will languish, and none of these chambers are interested in the latter. So let's go into the sort of the business lens of TFAC, if you will. AV. Thank you. So we looked at it from the point of business, and today transit gets people to work. 80% of the people who are currently in the transit system are going to work, or they are a future worker because they're going to school. It's actually 67% work, 13% school, and those are the workers we need now and for the future. Downtown Minneapolis, an area that I represent, 40% of the workers in downtown come by transit. If you have trouble believing that, do what some of your group did last year and come down to 5th and Marquette and about 4 o'clock in the afternoon and watch the thousands and thousands of people getting on the transit system to head back to their homes. For U.S. Bank, it is 50%. For Ameriprise, it is 60%. And those numbers are increasing because the young people, thank you, are more inclined to transit than some of us who are part of the silver tsunami. This next picture relates directly to what Mr. Langley said. We need transit to compete for workers. Now, demographics are the purview of a different committee, but there is no secret that we cannot fill the jobs and the quality jobs or any of the jobs we will have in the future for the businesses we currently have or intend to attract without people moving here. Yes, they have to move here. We had a session last week where someone said, I was in Canada and I came down here for the lower taxes and the climate. So maybe what we just need to do is import from Canada, because they found both of those to be better off in this marketplace. But we need to find them from all over the country and from all over the world. Next. Transit makes possible a region that draws workers and jobs. Companies are recruiting and targeting the next generation of talented workers, and they increasingly prefer urban lifestyles with mass transit. They have redefined freedom. When I was 17, freedom meant I got a car and I got keys and I got gas money. Today, freedom means as I get to work, I can stay on my iPad, I can do these other pieces, and so before I get to my job, it is quite a distinct change, and I think it is critical that we recognize that. This map that is really hard to read, but you have it again at your places, just shows how Minneapolis is faring against the rest of North America. And you can see that our little side profile of a nose there is not doing much compared to cities who you would never expect transit, like Dallas, the pickup capital of the world in many stereotypical views, or even what's going on in Pittsburgh, and certainly our situation with Denver. This is not a case of let's keep up with the Joneses. This is a case of let's remain relevant in the decades ahead. Those groups that are investing in transit are drawing the millennials that we all seek. Last year, Denver was rated the #1 destination for millennials to move to. We were number 39. We took a group to Denver in our annual intercity trip. Some of you have been on those trips. And we had a chance to talk to the governor, who said that it was transit that was driving their growth. Mayor Hancock could not have been more emphatic that it was transit. And when we talked to the Downtown Association's leader, they said all of our energies are based on getting 25 to 34-year-olds to move to Denver. All of our energies. That is our focus. What about seniors? What about, we're going to get them. What we need is tomorrow's workforce, and they're after them in a big way. So, a thriving region is a product that is continually evolving. Transit is a necessary and I would say critical component, and if we come up light, we will all lose. Now, I will turn it over to Judy Johnson, and she'll go into more specifics of the transit program for here in Minneapolis-St. Paul. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome to the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm Judy Johnson. I'm Director of Government Affairs at the Twin West Chamber of Commerce, and I'm pleased to be here today to talk to you a little bit about one of the projects that we've been supporting in the overall context of the TFAC recommended transit system. Your presentation that we've got prepared for you today shows you the green line, which is the next line, which is Southwest Light Rail Transit, as it moves from Minneapolis through St. Louis Park, Hopkins, Minnetonka, and Eden Prairie. And Twin West has been involved. Transportation and transit is a very critical issue for our chamber. We are a strong supporter of multimodal transit options with a good ROI, and we've been involved in looking at this corridor and what solutions we need to present this corridor, and we've been doing that for 10 years. And one of the things that was very important to us is that we be mode agnostic as we entered the process and as we reviewed the process. One of the goals for us was to make sure that we supported moving people around in the most effective and efficient manner possible, and this is the result of that. We are supporting Southwest Light Rail. It is has the best ROI And as you see, the line centers around the job centers in this corridor. The natural line could have gone out and followed pre-existing right-of-way out to the west, but you'll see a jog that takes place by K-Tel Drive and Industrial Park, and that's intentional because as we looked at the line, as all the people that are involved in this line said, you know, it's really got to support jobs, workers. The business community is talking about the needs, the future needs of what this corridor will rely upon, and you can see all of today's numbers of existing employees within a half a mile of the station. As we move on, we talked a lot to the job providers out in this neck of the woods. Twin West Chamber is proud to be part of the Grow Minnesota program in partnership with the Minnesota Chamber and now Greater MSP. We've been doing that for 10 years, and as we talk to employers in this region and really throughout the metro, one of the things that is very important for them is good transportation options for their workers, because workforce is really what drives a lot of them to stay here and grow here. As you'll see, we've got an expansion of new jobs that took place recently at Comcast. Their customer loyalty center is out in our region. Quite frankly, they could go anywhere in the country, but they really want the workforce that we have here, but they also know that those workers need good transportation and transit options. That's high on their priority list. United Health Group has a major expansion taking place in Minnetonka on 169. They've got 4 new towers going up. They are planning for 6,600 new employees. And honestly, this is really one of those wonderful public-private partnerships as it relates to transportation and transit funding. They have had to expand an interchange at 169 and Bren Road to make this happen with the city of Minnetonka in partnership. But this additional light rail line is critical for their future workforce needs. As you'll see here too, in this corridor, in this part of the west suburban metro region, we anticipate 60,000 new jobs will come to this area by the year 2030, and we need to plan for those now. Cities right now, too, are planning all around those proposed station lines, which is having great impacts on economic development and future zoning and guiding within the region as well. The next slide for you is a piece that was put out over a year ago, and I'll let you just read that at your leisure. Some of the takeaways, though, that are important today is we still need state support to really leverage a large part of the federal funding that will be coming for Southwest Light Rail. We're waiting for FDA approvals, and 50% of the project will be coming from the federal government, but we're still missing 10% of the entire project capital funding, and that's the state's portion, so we're looking for solutions, and that's why we're here today. One of the other important things that you can read as a takeaway from this piece is when we get moving on construction and we get these vendors and contractors in place, a large part of the money will actually go throughout the state of Minnesota, so everybody in the state not only gains by reducing congestion in this area, but also the dollars that go back to the local communities. Recently, we commissioned a poll. They call it a poll that we did a year ago, and just briefly, that you'll see that Southwest Light Rail enjoys great support from voters across Minnesota, and even more support here within the metro. Statewide, a year ago, it was 61%, and just recently, this past month, that's moved up to 70%. Metro, it was 64% a year ago, and it is now at 75%. So with that, I appreciate you giving us the time here to talk to you, and I will turn it over to Will Schroer, and then at the end stand for any questions that you may have.
Thank you very much. Welcome to the committee, Mr. Schroer.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much, and Chair Earhart as well. Thank you for having us. My name is Will Schroer. I have the honor of working for both the St. Paul area and the Minneapolis Regional Chamber of Commerce. The first person to have both those logos on the same business card without it bursting into flame, apparently. And it's a measure of the commitment and the intensity of feeling of our memberships that they have created this joint position to help have the capacity to have these conversations with you and other community leaders. The question that I was asked to address here today, again under the umbrella of discussing the Transportation Finance Advisory Committee's recommendations, was we heard from Mr. Klingel, all these other regions are making these investments. One of the TFAC recommendations was, of course, to make a large investment. One of the studies that the TFAC looked at was an Itasca project study on what would be the return on part of that investment for the state of Minnesota. I believe that was critical to the TFAC's deliberations. We thought it would be useful to share that with you here this morning as well. So again, as Todd told you, other regions are enjoying substantial returns on their transit investments, and then the question was, what would the return on such an investment here be? And so the Itasca project asked three fairly straightforward questions. If you're not familiar with the Itasca project, a collection of regional CEOs, almost entirely private sector, but some public sector, the president of the university, for example. So these questions were couched in what we like to think of as a private sector friendly way. So private sector makes investments all the time and tests the return on investment of an investment it's thinking about. Similarly, question number one is, built-out regional transit system would require substantial investment. What would the return on that investment be? In the private sector, you can accelerate investments if you see a benefit to doing so. We have that option as well. Would accelerating build-out to 2023 change the ROI? And then finally, again, as Mr. Klingel noted, a number of communities around the country and here see additional growth around transit stations. If that comes to pass around a newly built-out system, would that change the return on investment? So those are the three basic questions that Itasca asked. I helped out with the study, so I can say we, I hope, calculated 6 different kinds of direct impacts. And I want to emphasize for the two committees here that these do not assume any additional induced economic growth. For example, we start getting more of the jobs that are going to Denver back here. We assume none of that. We took the region as it is projected to be and asked, does it run differently? And if so, what are the changes in these 6 measures of running, including vehicle operating costs for everybody, not just for people who are using transit, right? And then we compared those against the costs of investing in and running and operating the system. On page 18, you'll see the bottom line of what was a very extensive set of analyses. The numbers under the investment column, I think, will be familiar to you from the TFAC, since they're the same set of numbers. And then the return on that investment would be at the low end, $6 billion and some on a $4 billion investment for an internal rate of return. Again, this was a private sector analysis, so using private sector metrics of success. And at the low end, internal rate of return of almost 8%. If you accelerate the plan, it costs a little more. The returns go up more than the additional cost. And then if that transit system does, in fact, attract additional growth around it, then the returns get substantially higher again. I'm told by our private sector partners that these are very good internal rates of return, that these would clear a private sector hurdle in just about any private sector endeavor that folks are familiar with. So once again, we have substantial benefits available to us, starting down in the $6 billion range and going up to almost $16 billion if we can come up with the funds to invest. A separate set of analyses, and I emphasize the separateness here because this is a little more prospective, and we try to be very conservative on the first set that I presented. As Mr. Langley said, companies are very, very interested, perhaps not surprisingly, in their employees being able to get to work. And as the job mixes change going forward, we can't really anticipate what exact mix of talent a company is going to need. It's interested in having access to a broad mix of labor. And what this chart illustrates is that the built-out transit system would substantially increase availability of labor to Twin Cities and regional businesses. And when we present this to other private sector audiences, interestingly enough, this is the chart that tends to most get their attention. They're also interested in the fact that we'll be saving money in other ways, but as Mr. Langley said, access to labor and talent is the number one thing, and this really provides it. So Just as Judy said, here in the Metro, folks understand some of these dynamics and are supportive of additional investment. From the same poll, we found substantial statewide support for additional investment in metropolitan and in statewide transit. So I'm going to finish with what I suspect is actually not our strongest argument, but Judy alluded to it, and I want to share it with you as well. This committee obviously is concerned with the welfare of the state, with economic development statewide. We've talked to you mostly about economic development and transit here in the region, which is what our job is. But we want to show you this empirical, so this is today's data, not forecast, distribution of where employees working on the Central Corridor rail line come from around the state. And they come from all over. So we're not here to suggest that transit investment is good necessarily for just short-term job creation, but I think it suggests that there are economic impacts statewide in the short run as well as in the long run, and so we'll leave you with that. Thank you for the opportunity to click through a lot of stuff in a short amount of time and available for questions. Thank you.
Thank you, members. We have about 5 minutes, and I just wanted to assure people that I'm sure there will be some legislation before this committee related to the issues that you all have talked about. Wonderful presentations. I'd certainly like to invite you back when bills come up. So I have 3 people. If we can make them very quick questions and very quick answers. There are a couple of announcements that need to be made before people scatter. So all right, this is going to have to be really fast, and this is it. Mason, Petersburg, Representative Seltzer, Representative Earhart. So, Representative Mason, quickly.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And at this point, maybe I'll just make some comments, and then if you'd like to respond. I mean, I'm really encouraged by the comments that I heard this morning, and in some cases, I think previously some of the chambers that I've been paying attention to have not been aggressive in pursuing transit. And to me, that's important. And I just had a town hall meeting on Saturday morning, and one of the questioners still comes up with, why should I pay for other people's transportation? So we need to get education out there and the statistics that you're using. The other thing that I wanted to say, well, I represent Egan, south of the river. We've had a couple bridges come across in the last couple decades. There's no provision for anything but automobiles. You can't bike, you can't walk, you can't do anything. And so, again, we really need a lot of people to support the multimodal approach in the future. So thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, briefly, may I?
Well, yes, of course.
Mr. Chair, Representative, thank you. I just want to emphasize, if we didn't have time, that the vast majority of the return that we saw in the return on investment study goes to drivers of cars, people who will continue to drive because there's less congestion.
Okay. Representative Petersburg quickly, then Representative Seltzer.
Thank you, Chairman. I have just 2 very quick questions that won't take very long. We heard a lot from the metro area Chamber of Commerce, and I know we want to support economic development around. Will we be hearing from Chambers of Commerce in the greater Minnesota area on their economic needs for transportation? And the follow-up question is for the panel, if I think you made a very eloquent case for the economic impact of a transit system in it. Because of that, I'm wondering if the business and industry community is willing to help participate in the cost of that transit system as well.
Who wants to take that one quickly?
We're fighting over it. Just a moment.
Mr. Chair.
Ms. Johnson.
Thank you. Representative, thank you very much for that thoughtful question. The business community is participating in the infrastructure, capital investment, and ongoing operations today, and we anticipate that we'll be doing so in the future. To what level, and as it relates to the entire budget that you're looking at for the state of Minnesota this year, we'll be at the table on all of those conversations, but we know that we need to make investments just like we do in our businesses every day, and that ROI is something that we look at. So yes, we know there will be investments made.
Thank you. And
a specific example, Mr. Chairman, is the United Health Group is donating the land for the station that will be closest to them specifically for that reason.
And Representative Petersburg, good point about greater Minnesota business interests. I'm very interested and committed to that. And as a matter of fact, I'm going to be traveling to Wilmer to talk to some people in the business community about transportation this Friday. Certainly open to meet with any local chamber, either here or throughout the state. So last two questions, Representative Seltzer, Representative Earhart.
I'll make it very quick. I just want to say that I am delighted to have the chambers here today and representing the tsunami of support that I saw when I was out on the campaign trail meeting with business owners, with Rotaries, with residents, just so supportive of the fact that we need to be competitive to be successful in the global economy. So I really want to thank you for that, for your stress on the multimodal approach. One of the questions that comes up, and I believe, Ms. Johnson, that you fielded this at another meeting that I was at, and that is, we have a very vibrant bus system. Why do we need light rail?
Mr. Chair, thank you, Representative Seltzer. The Chamber is very supportive of multimodal transportation solutions. So we love roads, we love bridges, we love buses. The Twin West Chamber loves opt-out bus systems, and we also support light rail transit. And they have to work as a system. And the reason our communities in the western suburbs really do have to also rely on bus transportation is we have a good spoke hub system, but we have a problem going suburb to suburb, our north-south alignments, which our business community really needs. If we can add other modes of transportation to reduce congestion, some of those bus lines maybe can be relieved from their core duties now to also do additional transportation for workers that are needed suburb to suburb to support the entire region. So it's a comprehensive solution that we've put forward today. It doesn't rely on just one mode. It's what makes sense in each corridor. It might be a different mode depending on the ROI and depending on the corridor and the needs, but it has to be multimodal, and our chambers do support that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Ms. Johnson.
So before I get to our last question, Representative Earhart's question or comment, we have a couple of quick announcements, one from our Republican lead and one from me. So, Representative Beard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Related to the transit discussion, I just want to clarify one thing that Representative from Egan said. The 494 bridge across the river does indeed have bike and walkway bridges all the way from Bloomington to Egan. And the Cedar Avenue Bridge also has a many $million-dollar bridge. You can't see it from the northbound lanes, but it hangs under the bridge and does cross the Minnesota River for bikers and walkers. Related to our infrastructure that we all support bipartisanly, the Minnesota Aviation Trades Association are here today, members. You'll see them walking about when they come to your office. Be sure to ask them about the airports in your area. They're having a little lunch over in the Capitol right now. But, Mr. Chairman, I just want to point out today is Minnesota Aviation Day at the Capitol, and we're happy to host them. Thank you.
Thank you. And then a quick announcement from me. Many of you have RSVP'd, and I thank you for our seminar tomorrow night at the University of Minnesota, 5 o'clock registration, and then we have a beginning at 5:45. Now, some of you have asked about parking. Mr. Scheer sent out a email about that, and if you didn't get it, please contact him. But there's also a transit option, and that is the number 50 bus that stops right across this from the State Office Building. We'll drop you off right in front of the McNamara Alumni Center. There's a little bit of a slower option. The local bus is the number 16. That also stops right in front of the McNamara Center. So you have both road and transit choices for tomorrow night. So the last question of the day belongs to Chairman Ron Earhart.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was just curious, are you hiding the Minnesota Chamber around here somewhere, or do you know where they are on this kind of affair?
Mr. Chairman, I don't think David Holston hides anywhere. He makes himself known, and I expect that if you have the opportunity and want to have him talk to you about this, he'd be happy to do so.
You don't know how they're feeling, Mr. Chairman, at this time about transportation funding and so forth?
Well, I can tell you that they normally leave regional issues to the regions, and so the local chambers have stepped up, but they did help us in 2008 with some transportation issues, and we are hoping they will join us again in 2013.
Thank you.
Thank you to the panel. Thank you, members, for a very lively and good discussion today. We will be moving forward and talking about revenue options and various road and transit funding sources as we move forward. Thank you again, everybody.